All right, well, welcome to Uncommons. It's an interesting episode because I'm joined by Phil Demers, who actually joined me at the Fox Theater many years ago.
4 years ago.
Before we even started the podcast, actually, and it was just a local town hall event. We showed Blackfish,
That's right.
and you were there to talk about your experience as a whistleblower at this horrible place behind us. It's interesting how far we've come, but also that the issue is so acute still. At the time, we were talking about a bill that had to be passed to end this kind of production and make sure we were protecting these cetaceans in captivity. And you were adamant we had to get this bill passed.
Mm.
Well, we got the bill passed.
Yeah.
And yet, we've got Marineland beside us now. And it was grandfathered through in a way. And now we've got 30 beluga whales. We've got 500 other animals that are in here. And all of them need to be saved in one way or another. And it didn't have to come to this, really, did it?
Well, what is glossed over in much of your story is we've got a unwilling Marineland in all of that to evolve in any way, shape, or form to be A, financially viable, for the security of their own future, but B, to adhere to any of the laws that we essentially pass, both provincially and federally. Although we did ban the breeding of the whales.
Yep.
Had we not banned the breeding of the whales, so currently there's 30 belugas remaining, there's 4 dolphins, we got 2 sea lions and a host of land animals there. Had we not banned the breeding of belugas in 2019, and albeit the pregnant belugas of 2019 were grandfathered in, so there were some whale births there. On average, Marineland had 5 to 7 belugas born per year. A couple would die, but there's, it's conceivable to say that whereas we have 30 right now in there, we would have had in excess of 50.
Right, they would have kept
possibly
going.
60. Yes,
Right.
Of course, they would have kept
going.
going.
The business model broke down with that law, but they would have kept going otherwise. I mean, they're the bad actors that just wants to keep bad acting.
At this point, it's the only part of the law that they've adhered to outside of importing, of course, which we banned, so it's beyond their control. But the breeding they stopped. But had they not, we'd be talking about 50 to 60 whales in those tanks. It was, that's something to really hang our hat on. That was a huge and super progressive lawsuit. But it does interestingly take us to this place now where Marineland is, essentially bankrupt. But we should stress,
owns a lot of land,
sitting on 700 acres of prime land, meant to fuel or feed the Holler family trust. Those are the heirs to it, and the operation is essentially sucking the money out of that. And so they're looking for the, be it most lucrative or least expensive way to get out of this thing. The sale to China was to be a profitable one. It should be stressed that here in North America, none of the facilities want to do business with Marineland.
Right.
A few years ago, 5 belugas were sent to Mystic Aquarium, 3 of which died within weeks and months, all having to do with pre-existing conditions from Marineland.
So pause for a moment, because I think for those who are listening, they may not know you've got 30 belugas here, and there was a deal that Marineland wanted to broker at least with a facility in China, Ocean Kingdom.
Chimelong Ocean Kingdom.
And the decision of the federal minister was to say no, animal welfare first. The primary purpose here is entertainment, and we're not convinced that they're going to be putting animal welfare first, akin to the concern here,
right?
And why we don't want this to continue to exist. But then the knock-on question, why it's so acute right now, is okay, but then what? Because Marineland comes out and proper monsters, they say, well, if we don't get emergency funding, we're gonna euthanize these whales.
Which is a familiar theme with Marineland. In all of my years of dealing with them, it was always do this or else. Again, I this morning alone, I watched a YouTube video. It was pretty thorough history of Marineland, and in it is always the familiar threat of, well, if you don't do this, I'm gonna, and it includes ship the park to the U.S. It includes a whole host of things. But that's Marineland's bluster when they don't get their way.
Right.
But that said, the spirit of the law was to give final say to the minister so that they can ultimately consider the interests of the animals in it, which is a level of personhood which is which is atypical of most laws, especially of animals.
So incredibly important step. Yeah.
Really, really progressive. The spirit is to end captivity, and if you can stamp that out here, the idea is that it'll evolve to the rest of the world. And to be fair, France adopted a very similar law recently passed, as well as New South Wales, the province in Australia, adopted a law. It's actually picking up around the world. So it's, I always stress when we look at, hey, we want to end captivity. I always stress that's a 100-year fight if all goes extremely well. You've got burgeoning business in China, some in Russia,
Right.
and we're still ending sort of ours here, sort of choking that off here, and that's still expanding there. So, we've started something that's going to continue elsewhere, but it's got to end here. It's got to end here first.
And ending it, you can put a law on the books, and okay, so on a going forward basis, you might avoid problems and avoid cruelty, but you still have 30 belugas here, and then the question becomes, well, what happens next? And I don't want to pretend it's just a Marineland problem, because you were just commenting on the fact that in Miami, you got Seaquarium that's now shut down.
Yep.
This is going to happen in other places too.
All of Mexico just banned it, and now all of their animals,
Now what?
albeit captive and legally captive, can no longer perform in shows, can no longer do the swim with programs, et cetera, et cetera. So what happens is it becomes unviable to the owners. They lose their incentive to have and use these animals. So what becomes? Well, unfortunately, in my estimation of what is available to us,
Yeah.
I'd always had hope that much of these animals would go to the U.S., but it's not going to happen by way of a brokered deal. Because, again, none of them want to touch Marineland for obvious reasons. Again, I mentioned the 5 whales that died at Mystic.
Yep.
They also know of the bad PR Marineland's been getting here for the decades. I mean, it's been global news. You can't ignore it. So SeaWorld also had to sue Marineland a number of years ago to get an orca back. So SeaWorld doesn't want to touch Marineland. So I don't think anyone in the U.S. wants to associate with buying animals off Marineland or brokering any type of deal, affiliations, et cetera, et cetera. But, I'd had this hope that this government, the Provincial Animal Welfare Society especially, with their policing powers and their ability to seize animals, you have essentially an opportunity to seize these animals and send them to these places, whereas those places might be receiving of them if they're by way of a rescue versus a brokered deal. But again, this is me talking, theorizing, trying to figure this thing out.
But let's imagine that. So the federal government has done its part in passing a law. I think the federal government could play a strong convening role here, and we're starting to. I mean, in the wake of the minister turning down those permits to Ocean Kingdom in China, I mean, there is a role for the federal government to show some leadership here. But the actual law, the power that you're talking about, the seizure power, that exists provincially. And you got Doug Ford over here talking about caring about dogs, and okay, that I like that. Okay, yeah, let's have concern for all animals. But in this particular case, as soon as Marineland says, well, without emergency funding, we'll euthanize them, they should be coming in here, seizing and using their authority. And by the way, I mean, even as part of, I was reading, as part of the settlement back in 2017 of dropping the lawsuit, I mean, they agreed to monitoring. I mean, like, what are we even talking about here? Have animal welfare experts, animal science experts.
Well, they're in there. They're in there.
And why can't Doug Ford seize these and say, now we can broker a deal with the animal welfare top of mind instead of Marineland trying to extract top dollar?
So in the think tank that's become since all of this, and the, sort of the where does this go, I do have to say, with limited options, China might be atop the very best options. And let me explain why. If those animals were in a neutral place right now, let's just do this as like a sort of a thought experiment. If those animals are in a neutral space right now and you had to elect where they're going,
Yeah.
outside of the laws themselves, which is, for the most part, it doesn't exist in China that I know. I don't want to be quoted, but I don't know what the animal oversight and laws are like over here. But we know what they are here, and we know that they exist here. But that said, they're not really serving so much these days. If there was a choice between the facilities, it'd be hands down, you'd be sending them to China. It wouldn't even be a question. There wouldn't even be a question. These are brand new facilities. They're massive. I had a team member was there 2 weeks ago. A former friend of mine that worked at Marineland works there. These are brand new, massive, expansive facilities, the conditions of which are good and, in fact, maybe even be said to be great in the realm of captive facilities. I don't want to be a defender of any facility. I don't want to say, hey, that's a good one. But what on the scale of, you wouldn't consider this for a moment. But because they're in there, it becomes a little bit more complicated because it's a question of removing them. But because of the limited space of where those animals have and being against the clock, they're going to have to go somewhere. And again, I stress the U.S. Ideally first and foremost. If it doesn't work out there, or if, obviously they don't have the space for 30, we know this already. Some are going to have to go to China.
So let's walk. Let's take some time to walk through those options, because again, some people might say, well, why not return them to the wild? And we've seen the consequences of that in some ways. There's a return to facility in Iceland at one point, I think, and
That's
didn't
not
turn
been
out
working
so
well.
well.
That's not been
And
working.
so there are just knock-on challenges to that option.
There is no such thing as a perfect scenario also that needs to be stressed, because I think we have been wasting a lot of time and thought on what would be perfect, and
Right.
it doesn't exist. We have to scale our expectations back to what is, and also stress that these animals are not very healthy. Now, I'm not going to call them sick.
Do we know? Is it?
Well, on a scale of they're all unwell by virtue of the conditions that have been here.
But is there that openness with, say, nonprofit or government experts and animal scientists to have access into
Not a
properly?
chance. And
Right.
for that matter, anything that you would have access to look at would be changed.
Right.
So anyone that has a pen and putting it to paper has an interest in some people not knowing everything that's going on.
So the wild's out, and then you've got
Wild is out.
and there have been proposals for animal sanctuaries. There's one in Nova Scotia that is closest to realization.
No.
Having spoken to the folks there, they said, well, the earliest is really next fall, and that's an optimistic timeline. And then they're talking about a max of taking 10 of the whales, which today, in the environment that we exist, doesn't seem like the most plausible option when you want to protect these animals and put animal welfare and their animal interests first today. So the answer does, first is just who's the decision maker, and it can't be Marineland that is deciding what the deal on the table should be.
Well, clearly they don't make the decisions in the best interest of the
Yeah,
animals.
exactly.
Just to stress the point of the whale sanctuary in Nova Scotia, I wish it more than anyone to be an operational place, but it's not. I've gone. It can't be. It's not going to be. It's decades and hundreds of millions, and who's footing the bill? This is a theory at best, and we got to move beyond theories, or else what happens is people start hanging their hats out, people start talking, but the specific needs of those animals, and that's outside of a perfect world. If we're going to have a sanctuary for animals, that has to be tried in the best cases, not in one of duress and emergency, etc. This is an experiment for the most part. But those animals need to get access. So we're talking about this monster sanctuary, but did they, in all of that, go through what is required to actually care for these animals? You need a rising floor of a tank to be able to access sick animals so that you can give them medication, etc. You got to be able to access the animals. But an animal's sick in the middle of your sanctuary, how are you going to get them? And get them on back to the shoreline, back into a tank where they can be monitored and then, be given drugs, etc., treated. And you've got the challenges that these animals already face is just outside of the scope of what an experiment at this point can offer.
Right.
These animals need facilities with people that know where to inject the animals, know where to draw blood, they got the book on the meds, and they got access to those animals, because that's essentially what they need. When we're talking about what's happening here, it's essentially a rescue, and it's how it needs to be framed. It's how I've always said it. And again, I'm sounding like a broken record because I've been saying this for a decade. And if you read it, I don't think I've done a single interview in the last decade where I said, if we don't get those animals out, they're going to die. And it's easy to say, well, of course, they're all going to die if they don't move. But, if you watch at the rate that I was saying it and the rate that the animals started to die, we're talking about a scale that's grading up and speeding up and accelerating. So 30 animals have died there, essentially. I know it's in the records as 20 whales, but, if you add the 3 that died at Mystic as being Marineland whales. If you add we know that in 2019, there's an affidavit that Marineland swore of having 58 beluga whales, but we know that they would have pregnant ones, so 5 to 7 more born there. Deduct those numbers because they're no longer in that inventory. You've got 30 whales that have died, essentially since about 2018, more than 50 since I quit, which will have been 60 or more if we hadn't passed the breeding ban. Nothing here is new. Marineland's bluster, et cetera, et cetera. You're finally hearing their actual voice. You're not seeing the jingle on TV. You're not seeing them talking about their animal welfare record and boasting it is the best in the world. You're seeing the people here are seeing the Marineland, the real Marineland for the first time.
Yeah, big difference between everybody loves Marineland and we're gonna kill the whales if you don't cruise them like a sip on.
Right, and this is a theme I've known for far too long because they don't like me.
But so just to close this, what's on the table could be on the table. So you've got sanctuaries talked about promising in the longer term,
Well, still,
potentially.
if and when that exists, the belugas hopefully are alive, no matter where they are in the world, to one day be received there.
Right.
So there's
But
hope if they're alive, which we have to stress.
And so, but in the immediate term, you're looking at, in an ideal world, and it's not an ideal world, you've got the premier acting, you got the provincial government that would seize control in order to make decisions in the best interest of the animals. You've got a situation where then you would survey what's available across North America and elsewhere and say, we're going to proactively reach out and try to place these animals, putting animal welfare interests first.
And if I was negotiating those moves, I would say any facility that receives these animals have to adhere to the spirit of the 2019 law.
Right.
Which is, and I think North America would be glad to adhere to that. They already generally do. I don't think they're breeding belugas. Most of these places have their own, despite it not being law, they're sort of in-house, no longer breeding. Definitely orcas that I know of. Hopefully dolphins one day, but we're not there yet. But that, yes. So with the caveat that, hey, if we can follow this, it should be noted that the spirit of the S203, which is the law that passed, was that we're going to eradicate captivity in Canada. Sort of the idea was, we're going to end this cruel
situations of captivity.
And with the idea of that globally, they'll have this effect. But that said, these animals who are already here, sadly, and with zero to -0 option of ever being returned to the wild, and I hate to be this voice, but if they go elsewhere, it may very well spare some live ones from being captured, and that is in the spirit of the law. So there is some salvation in this ending in Canada, the animals moving on to better places, and no more whales ever returning, and that practice being said and done, and we wash our hands of it, and that's the biggest win that can be done. And the noise of our bullhorns out here follow them to the next place. They'll hear us out there. The fight continues where they go. That's the reality. We got a 100-year problem ahead of us if everything goes well.
And let's talk about the other animals. I mean, you are known as the Walrus Whisperer. You didn't start fighting just for the whales. I mean, you were fighting for the walrus smoochie. And there are an estimated, 500 other animals?
There's a lot of deers in there,
yeah. And so is that also part of the picture here? I mean, obviously the public focus has overwhelmingly been on the whales, but what do we do with the other animals?
Well, that I know of, the Toronto Zoo expressed some interest. They were visiting the facility in early October. Those animals are likely destined for, ideally, some sanctuaries that we know do exist. There are some.
Yeah.
The bison are already gone. No one seems to really know where. There's theories, but they're gone. The bear, they're gonna have a tough time because bears are solitary animals. They shouldn't be confined to a tight space anyways. It's already really antisocial and dangerous for them. It's like a really unnatural environment. And so they're sort of stunted, and no place is looking for a bunch of bears. So,
right.
I won't be surprised if a lot of them get euthanized very quietly. And the deer, 500 deer or so, what are you gonna do with that? So I don't know. Again, I leave this to, I've had my I got a decade plus of fighting against this place. That's the extent of my knowledge of animal rights. And a lot of people come to me and say, hey, this and that. I'm just like, talk to an organization that knows this stuff.
But them fighting you too, right? So, the last time we spoke, where we had an audience in front of us.
Yep.
You were still deep in litigation where they were taking you on and trying to silence you. It's interesting. You've come to animal rights, but also you've really been, I think, you've you've shown what it is to be a whistleblower in a publicized, important way, and the importance of whistleblowing protections, despite the fact that they came after you with everything they got. And where is all of that at now? I mean, you've before we started recording, you were talking about Smooshy ended up where?
So we essentially, so they sued me in early 2013 for plotting to steal Smooshy the walrus,
Yeah, you terrible person, you.
and I
Yeah.
could have done it, but I didn't, and it had nothing to do with Marineland. But if anyone could have done it, but I wasn't going to. You'd have to be crazy, and much as they tried to make me out to be crazy, there's some percentage of crazy, but it's not to the scope of what they had described in this lawsuit. So it was baseless. It did inspire anti-slap legislation provincially, which was great. It didn't help me, but it's it's there for the future.
It's important. Yeah.
And I also stress when you say you were a whistleblower, and we passed a host of different sort of whistleblower protection laws and everything. This wasn't an animal rights issue. This was an animal rights issue when I left. It wasn't animal rights. It was here's what I've experienced, and if something doesn't happen to these animals will, their suffering will increase. To me suddenly being sued, like, well, these were my friends, these animals, and the employees. This is like, these were, you're gonna see your neighbor's dog like that, and you walk them every day. You're gonna have some concerns, like, so this was that for me. It spills over into an animal rights realm, of course, because animal rights people who had, to their credit, been fighting this forever, suddenly, I show up, but, to be fair, I'm not really an animal rights guy.
Smooshy was your friend,
Smooshy's yeah, of course.
right? Like,
Right,
that's
of course.
your
Of course. But I'm just, when it comes
those you love mistreated.
when it comes to the history of and what is the box of animal rights activists, which I get very often, it's like, no, man, that's not really what this was for me. What this was, let's say, professional asshole versus semi-professional asshole. And it was a clash of all crazy proportions. If you weren't witness to it, I can only imagine how much fun it was on the sidelines. I mean, I like to do it up for the people, put on a show, and we did. But that's what this was. This was every corner. This was a fight tooth and nail in every aspect and element of every which way of my life outside of that of the animals. It started as an animal thing, and it's taken on an entire other level. But with that said,
And taking over your life. I mean,
well,
the litigation and just all of that takes an incredible amount of toll and time.
I would not have imagined when it happened that this was going to be like the most forever decision. I'll be honest, and this is ambitious and in retrospect, super naive of me, but armed with the truth at the time, I thought in my mind, this is going to take 6 months to resolve. Again, my objective was not let's shut Marineland down.
6 months.
Well, what did I know about litigation, about anything? I just thought, well, listen, if the people know, well, not even the people, I thought if the authorities knew, if they knew. And here they were, here it was, they knew. And that was like the beginning of my journey. And here I am 13 years later, and it wholly and entirely reshaped into a pretty efficient Marineland busting machine. Like, it's been a pleasure. But yeah, there's an element of almost, it's a weird one, but I almost chalk it up to what retired NHL players might feel like when they're so engaged in something that requires so much energy and, and levels of execution, and you really got to psych yourself up for some of the shit I've been through. Now I'm trying to take a breath from it all. Then we got this thing going on still. You're like, ay. So no, it turned into, I guess, what will be a decades-long life identifier. It's become, I'm kind of married to this place now.
Well, exactly. And you live through personal challenges and then coming after you legally and all of that. But we stand outside this place today, and you're going to survive it. This is on its last legs, and it's in large measure the law we passed, in large measure the public outcry, in large measure because you were able to shine a light on it and called attention to something that was wrong.
It kind of looks like a divorce, and now we want the kids.
Hard to find a home for the kids. That's the problem.
Well, but here we are. But again,
Exactly.
I do stress, I think that all of this will be revisited by the feds because there is going to have to be some extra consideration give to the immediate conditions and
Yes.
just the
Exactly.
extent of how awful all of this is. Should other things be considered first? Yes, I think so too. I don't think Marineland should stand on, hey, do what we say or give us money and this and that. No, 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 no.
No, they've found their way to profit.
It's a
They should care for the animals.
it's a breath of fresh air to see nobody caving because Marineland has known that for too long.
Yeah.
But so there should be a very diligent work done as into what can be done for these animals. But given the fact that we are super limited, I think there's going to have to be some reconsideration to the Chinese facilities. It just is. It would be great if they came with the caveat of don't breed them and don't do this. Maybe that could be negotiated. I don't know.
But I think, and I think it's useful to close here. I mean, in the end, in the same way that you've got individuals, including yourself, who have shown leadership. I mean, at this moment in time, we need governments not to react, not to say, well, it's our job to review a permit, or it's our job to review if there's a complaint or there's an investigation, to say, no, no, no. We are going to proactively find a home for these animals. We're going to proactively pull the stakeholders together, pull the organizations together across North America and elsewhere, say, it's not a perfect world. So what exists here? What is possible? And to show some leadership and to not just react and to try to solve the problem in a proactive way and not leave it to these guys who are not intending to solve the problem at all and didn't want the law passed in the first place.
They've proven themselves as being irresponsible caretakers. It's time for other people to have a hand in what becomes. And, they may not like it, but they've set the stage for exactly that. So now other people will have a say.
Appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thanks,